Hello and welcome to Disc Dandies, a podcast where each episode two friends share a recommendation with one another. We talk about what we liked, what we would change, and try not to judge each other too much over our bad tastes. This episode, we talk about relationships. But a disclaimer, do not take relationship advice from a Disc Dandy. Ever.
Jordan, I hate to inform you, but you just lied to all of our fans, the Disc or the Dandy Dogs, all of them. It's actually three friends here. I've got my cat Atticus here in my lap because he's being a bit of a butt when we're trying to record.
Oh yes, he knows his face is on the cover of our podcast and he's trying to be present. He's doing his job as mascot.
You're right. I think that he could definitely be considered the first dandy dog, even though I don't think he wants to be considered a dog. But yeah, so thanks for lying to our audience. I think it's a great start to this episode.
Yeah, considering that lying does not share any themes in this game, or at least I don't think, unless I didn't pick up on it. Yeah, I had to make up for that on my end of things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, it feels good to be back. It has been a little bit, but we're back. We're locked, cocked, and ready to rock, and I am super excited to get into our discussion today.
Yeah, we spent a little bit of time away from the podcast, mostly just exploring the wastes of Shadow Moses, that whole 9 yards. Very, very high profile, very secret hush hush stuff from the Disc Dandies.
Yeah. In addition, we got stuck in the world's longest Dungeons and Dragons session. Like, it was multiple hundreds of hours, and we just couldn't escape.
Yeah, we titled the campaign Life.
For sure. But to kick us off more formally, I do have a question to ask you.
Sure, pop it for me, baby.
So, a bit of a spoiler, but we are talking about a mobile game today, and I got to be honest, I haven't done a lot of mobile gaming in my life. I've never been one to have a super nice, top-of-the-line phone. So I'm a little behind the times on mobile gaming. So I wanted to ask you, how much mobile gaming have you done in your life, and do you have a top favorite mobile game that you always go back to, or that you have very fond memories of?
Yeah, this is a good question. Whenever the whole discourse over mobile games was forefront in the gaming scene, people were worried that mobile gaming was going to kill console gaming, the same way that PC gaming was supposed to kill console gaming and vice versa, all that stuff. I was actually on the side of hey, no, mobile games are actually pretty cool. Mostly there are a bunch of not great games that kind of get pumped out just for ad shares and stuff, but there are games formerly I would have said Sword and Sorcery, but then games like Florence and Monument Valley and some other really cool games like Badlands that were pretty cool. They basically took advantage of being small games on a touch device. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a good style of gaming to have. I would say, though, if I had to name one favorite mobile game that I've had, this is going to be very cliche, but it's just Hearthstone. It's a really damn good mobile game. For sure, yeah.
Hearthstone, super popular. Anyone who's super into card games knows it. I've actually, I don't really play Hearthstone much anymore, but when I did try out the mobile version. I have to say it was a very faithful and great port of the game. They did a really great job with it.
Yeah, and you would have some people argue that it's the way to play. Mostly just people. It would mostly be casual players because your pro community is mostly on PC. But casual players really love the the mobile approach. It's so faithful and it plays really well, and it's well optimized, which is something that you will see most mobile games that are big and heavily produced. They will burn a hole in your pocket type of thing.
Yeah. It helps that Hearthstone was clearly meant with mobile, or was clearly designed with mobile in mind. It didn't start out on mobile, but you could tell they were thinking about it during the ground up design of the game, and that really helps.
Yeah, I do have some other mobile recommendations, but I honestly, a lot of them might end up as exhortations because they're short, they're sweet, and a lot of them are like they're like little experimentations, and I think they make for a good conversation.
Oh yeah, for sure. You gotta keep your powder dry, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, like I said, I've really not gotten into mobile gaming at all. I mostly just look at Reddit on my phone. Still using that same Reddit app that I downloaded 10 years ago. That's why I do it on my phone. But there is one game that I've played recently that I've really gotten into and beat all the way through, and it's a Boomer Simulator. Have you heard of this?
I haven't, no.
It's literally the Boomer and the Zoomer like Wojak memes, so the Zoomer has like the Macklemore haircut and is like flossing like in Fortnite, and you're the Boomer driving a riding lawnmower, and it's almost styled like Doom. You're riding the lawnmower and you're trying to like cut the grass, and you're also trying to hit the Zoomer that's flossing, and you're not supposed to hit the fence or any rocks or trees. It's like you have to like navigate and cut the grass, hit the Zoomer, and then get back into the garage before you hit anything. And it's really fun.
It sounds hilarious at the very least, and it's made all the more funny by the fact that Zoomers and millennials can't afford riding lawnmowers.
They can barely afford these top of the line phones that you need to play like the really nice mobile games these days.
Oh no, don't you know it's avocado toast and mobile phones that are suppressing your generation?
Okay, here's my conspiracy theory. Here's my gut shot for this episode. I don't think that avocado toast existed as a thing that people like ate and could order in a restaurant until that one article came out, lampshading it. I think that person invented the dish, and then everyone picked up on it because of the meme.
Yeah, we were all like, "Hey, that's a really good cheap idea. We're going to do that."
Exactly. I don't have any proof, but that's just my thought on it. But I'm looking forward to trying out some of these mobile games. Hopefully, you'll suggest some to me over the course of this podcast, and I can really dive deep into mobile gaming.
Yeah, well, on that note, we're going to be talking about as we'll establish, a mobile game this episode, Florence. Are you ready to get into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'll hold your horses, actually, because I have something I want to talk about.
Sure.
I want to talk about the Dandies YouTube channel.
All right.
If you've made it this far, we would really like it if you could hop onto our YouTube channel, subscribe. Those numbers matter. If you're listening, give us a like, hit the bell icon. Everyone knows what those things do. But most importantly, leave a comment. This is something we have always asked for even before we started this little like YouTube pitch. We really want feedback. The show is it's always been posited as a conversation and like a discussion among friends about things we're passionate about. So if you're listening on like a podcast app or on YouTube, please comment back. Tell us what you think about the topic. Get involved. It all adds to the quality of the show.
Please tell us how wrong we are. I thrive on it.
Yeah, I mean, we know how wrong we are, but we really want you to drive it home for us.
My favorite thing is when we get those random comments on our videos or on Twitter or something like that. So if you want to make our day, that is the number one way to do it. And subscribing. I like seeing the number go up. But yes, YouTube, great place to check us out.
All right. With all that said, Florence.
Yes.
As you said during our last episode, you hadn't even really heard of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have any impressions going into this just based off of like the app download alone?
To be honest, I was trying to keep as open mind as possible. You'd mentioned that was really more of a narrative focus, with the little mini game. So I wasn't expecting it to be some sort of like, me being glued to the screen. I figured it would be, kind of a bit of a lazy is not the right term, but
like a passive experience.
Passive experience, and it really was. So I had a bit of a roller coaster in terms of how much I was enjoying this game moment to moment. At the beginning, it was not a slog. I kind of had to push through a little bit at the beginning. I was a little put off by the kind of twee art style and the lack of kind of dialogue and a lot of detail about what was going on. But I did eventually start getting invested in what was going on, and I really walked away at the end of the game feeling really great about it. So yeah, I'm glad that I stuck through it, and I ended up with a positive impression of this game.
Yeah. As we're going to be discussing here in a little bit, I really enjoyed this game when I first played it, and I enjoyed it again our second time around. I just as like a broad like overview for this game, there are very criticizable elements to this game, but I think the things that do work are what makes it notable, which we're going to get to here in a little bit. But I guess just to kind of give it a little bit of background. This was a game published by Annapurna Interactive, which at this point has kind of made themselves as a publisher known as like the publisher with a good eye. They publish a lot of really solid, weird kind of indie driven games, things that wouldn't have gotten it's like seen the light of day otherwise. They've published like for one, they did like What Remains of Edith Finch.
Oh, did they? Oh,
Yeah.
I did not catch that.
Yes, yeah, and they publish a lot of like different mobile games, and I believe they were involved in It Takes Two. I'd have to double check that. I could be wrong, so if I am wrong, I'm sorry. But they are involved in a lot of like weird off the wall indie games.
I am not surprised to hear that, actually, because I was thinking about Edith Finch a little bit while playing this game. So I'm not surprised at all to see a thread connecting the two.
Yes, yeah. Annapurna Interactive in general, whenever you see their like stamp on a game, you know that you kind of get an idea of what that game's going to be. Like I said, they have a very good eye. They pick some really solid projects. With that said, this game was directed by Ken Wong, who was the creator of Monument Valley. Monument Valley is a very critically acclaimed mobile game. It's arguably one of the most well-received mobile games ever put out, and this is his follow-up to that before he went into Monument Valley 2. And so there was, whenever Florence was announced, I remember there being there being kind of like a swell and people being excited about it. So there was a lot of eyes on this game when it came out, as far as mobile gamers are concerned.
I have never heard of Monument Valley. I know nothing about it. What like just real quickly, what type of game is this?
It is a puzzle game. It uses perspective. You have these kind of like these like weird MC Escher-esque environments, and you're moving a small girl through them, and as you rotate the screen, it changes how parts of the environment connect to each other, and you have to kind of help her navigate around that world. And it's very good, very, very beautiful game.
Yeah, that seems interesting.
So Florence in particular was at the top of my mind, going like as I kind of alluded to on a previous episode where I was like interested in seeing more games about romance. This kind of just fits the bill, though a little bit indirectly, because as we're going to get to here in a little bit in our story, this isn't so much about like romance as it is about a breakup and what that leads to. Mm-hmm. I think that it's a game more about this relationship than it is about like love, I guess. This is kind of what I was getting at whenever I said I want to like see more games that are like a little bit more grounded, a little bit more focused on like our relationships with people and stuff. Maybe it's like COVID, like post-COVID influenced or something like that. But I think this really like kind of hit the nail on the head for me in terms of what I was wanting to play, and replaying it scratched that itch for me.
I can absolutely see that. If you're somebody that, for given the current situation, if you're somebody that finds yourself, missing the company and interaction with others, I could see where a game like this, Florence, would scratch that itch. And yeah, definitely good to have stuff like this available.
Yeah, okay. And just to kind of give us a brief overview of the story, because honestly, there's not really much to go over. It's a very short game, and the beginning, middle, and end are pretty easily summarized. And I guess sure, just at this point, we're going to go ahead and disclaimer, spoilers, definitely spoilers here. It is a very short game. You can probably finish it in like 40 minutes or so. In fact, I think like the time to beat, whenever I looked at it, it was like 45, 48 minutes if you wanted to do absolutely everything, which there isn't many side things, if any at all. So like you could sit down in an hour before this podcast, play it, and then, listen. So please do so.
We should look into what like the speedrunning records are for this game.
I bet you could beat this game in like 10, 15 minutes speedrunning.
If you really wanted to, you had the games memorized, like which one was coming next, so you could immediately be like brushing the teeth as soon as the toothbrush shows up. Yeah.
Just to kind of cover the story, though, it revolves around a girl or a woman, I guess. Her name is Florence, name of the game. She's a disheartened office worker who finds romance with a young cellist named Krish. Story is told through visuals, the music in the game, and the mini games that are in the game. There aren't many big bullet points that happen in the story. It's a meeting, I guess kind of a falling out, a breakup, and then what takes place afterwards.
This is the ultimate show don't tell game, because
Yes.
this game does not tell you anything. There is tiny bits of dialogue, mostly with the mother. I think when Florence speaks to her mother over the phone, sometimes you get tiny bits of dialogue, but this game doesn't tell you anything. Sometimes that really works, and sometimes I think it's a bit of a detriment. But you are exploring her story through seeing her life, through her eyes. And the mini game, and the mini games help illustrate the life that she's living, the actions that she's doing, what's happening to her.
Yeah, and before we go into the gameplay itself, because I think that's probably going to end up being I guess the most controversial portion of this discussion. I kind of want to touch on the themes that this game's tackling, because it's kind of hard to despite it being really short, it's kind of hard to label it. It's a game about a relationship, but what genre would you say it fits into?
In terms of the narrative or the game as a whole?
Let's do both. Just hit both.
This is and I struggled with this because and this is just getting into spoiler territory. She kind of is in a bit of a rut. At the beginning of the game, she doesn't. She's kind of just trying to figure out what she wants to do. She meets Krish, and they have this whirlwind romance. They live together. They move in, live together, and I think they're together for about a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. I mean,
yeah.
That's a significant relationship.
Yeah, we don't really have too much to say about Florence and Krish. We're given their passions and their place in the world, but it's more we kind of get snapshots of their emotions than we do about their actual characterization. They're a part of a greater whole, which is which is the message that the game is trying to push forward.
Sure. Yeah. So they're in a relationship for 2 years. Some sort of falling out happens. We start to see cracks in their relationship, and they eventually drift apart. They break up, and then after that, Florence, through the help of a gift that she got from Krish in the middle of the story, kind of refocuses on her art. Really, takes that forward, starts finding success, and starts, kind of not rebuilding her life, but building a life for herself based on what she, the experiences of that relationship, and just growing as a person. It's almost like there's two stories being told. Is this about the relationship, or is this about the growth of Florence herself? And I think there's a bit of a dichotomy there that wasn't really bridged due to what I think is kind of the stripped down, almost no details, told to you storytelling. So there, those are two kind of themes that are almost kind of conflicting a little bit.
Yeah, and so how I bridged those themes, I wouldn't say. I think I agree with you that they do kind of rub up against each other, because you're trying to I think it leaves a little bit up to interpretation towards the end, that maybe it could have been a little bit more guided through another minigame or something like that. But I think the bottom line was that this relationship was a foundational block for her. Even though the relationship didn't work out, I think what really resonated with me in the end is that it was still important, and she still grew from it. And I guess a scene that really made me sad was there was a part in the game, I think it was Christmas or something like that, maybe it was a date, I can't remember exactly, but Krish got her an art set, trying to kind of encourage her to go back and pursue her passions in the art world and stuff. And after we kind of see them have their falling out, we kind of see it unopened on her desk at work, she hasn't really pursued it since he got it for her. And I think part of that situation was that she hadn't yet grown to the point where she was ready to pursue that again. And she wasn't ready to embrace that part of things. And I think her relationship with Krish is what kind of pushed her to do so in the end.
Yeah, that's definitely a great way to look at that. Yeah, the ending where we see Florence, flourishing, so to speak. Living a life that she's happy with. Doing the art thing. The final scene is her looking out of a sunny window, smiling with like art, stuff behind her. The ending was very emotionally impactful for me, but yeah, it is a little fractured there. A major theme would be that she's thankful for the a relationship because it was a stepping stone
Hmm.
to where she ended up at the end. And that's really highlighted by the fact that she finds the photo when she was leaving her job and she decides to keep it, even though at some point during the breakup she was like throwing things away. And the fact that she starts the art back up with the gift that Krish got her. That's like a pivotal moment, and one I kind of wish was a bit more highlighted in the game. Kind of as like a thesis statement, like, hey, this is important. You kind of have to think about it. You kind of have to realize that that's an important point yourself. But I really wish there was more detail and dialogue to kind of explain that was kind of the point that they were going for, because the narrative, if you're kind of only paying attention to a certain part of it, it really implies that like Krish was like holding her back in some way. Like
Yeah.
you really need to like think about the fact that that it was more of a stepping stone, and that she was able to become that person because of that relationship, instead of what the narrative kind of implies, that she wasn't able to do that because of Krish. So yeah, just needing more of a stronger like thesis statement, like, hey, this is what we're trying to say with this game. But overall, I do think they did a pretty good job, and the ending again was very emotionally impactful for me.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely like a game for someone who is wanting to kind of like, because like we said, we can beat this game pretty quickly, but I think you want to kind of take your time through it and think about what's happening in each of these scenes, because I think that's where you get most of the reward. Like for me, whenever I think about the beats in this game, I one thing that I landed on was like, why was Krish upset? Whenever they're having their falling out, we see him playing his music like in a school that he had wanted to go to, but I guess just never mustered up the willpower or courage or whichever else to like focus and go back. And Florence kind of encouraged him to do so. But
Mm.
whenever we get to the falling out portion of the game, he is very disgruntled, and we don't really know why. A lot of that is left up to our own inferences. And for me, I actually think that part of it is his relationship with Florence, and because he was growing in that relationship, I feel like, where for her, which was kind of bullet pointed by her, kind of sticking her art set like in the pile of like paperwork and stuff like that, and just kind of forgetting about it. She wasn't pursuing the things that were making her happy, and kind of returned to her disgruntled work life, where Krish was like pursuing like his side of things, and maybe that was causing friction in the relationship. But all of this that I'm saying is that these are all like inferences that I made. It's not outright said by the game. I think that's both a positive and a negative, because like you said, on the one end of the spectrum, you want to know what the game is trying to say with this. You want that thesis, but on the other end, it's kind of nice to just like sit down and like just really think about what the game is saying, or even think about these scenes, and like kind of like, and sure, there's some amount of like projection that goes into this, but I would be interested to hear what other people are pulling from these scenes.
I think that that's a really great perspective, and I'm really glad that you laid it out that way. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Something that I was thinking about while playing this game is something I think I've talked about on this episode, on this podcast before. For relationships to be successful and good for both partners, it requires both partners to give 60%. Like no one can be at 50% and it be a happy relationship for everyone. I found myself kind of wondering, and I was going to ask you, like, I really want to know what caused the breakup, because it's not actually said what the actual like break was, but I think it might just be that. I think it's just an example of a mismatch of what each person was putting into the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was a point in your life type thing too, because I think a lot of whenever you hear people break up, a common thing you'll hear is like, we're just in different places in our lives right now. And while I used to kind of scoff at that reasoning, this game kind of highlights why it's a valid reason. If the Florence, maybe this relationship would have worked out differently if the Florence at the end of the game had met the Krish at the middle of the game, where they were both actively pursuing something that they were happy about, you know?
Yeah.
And because I mean, your state of mind influences how you handle things. And if you're at work all day like Florence is and are miserable at your day job and not really pursuing your your personal passions, it'll affect how you come home and speak to that other person. And again, these are all things I'm drawing from what we saw in the game. And for me, like, I think the reason why the game's called Florence and not Krish is because this is about Florence's growth, in my opinion. And absolutely. I think that's how this relationship helped her finish growing in the last act of the game.
Yeah. Again, it's like the relationship is a part of Florence's story.
Yes.
It had. I finished the game after playing the beginning a while before. I kind of wish I never got the opportunity to, but I kind of wish I could have played the game from start to finish in one sitting, because I do remember parts of the beginning really focusing on Florence's rut at the beginning of of the story before she meets Krish. And yeah, I think that kind of highlights that the story is about more than just the relationship. I do kind of like the idea of the actual relationship part being as bare bones and like detailless as it is, because it does allow you to more easily project your own feelings about relationships and like your own relationships onto that to kind of make it more impactful, because you can kind of insert yourself a little bit more into the story, because I think we've all kind of had situations, where, bad fights in relationships, or, meet cutes, or, the excitement of like, taking a step forward, like moving in or like becoming more serious. But that does kind of hamper the ability to actually be invested in Florence's story specifically. So again, another little split there.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point to kind of move into the gameplay portion, because I think in terms of like talking about problems with experiencing Florence's story, that we have something that I feel is like not a 50-50 split, but maybe like a 70-30 split in terms of like mini game effectiveness in the gameplay portion.
Sure. Yes. And this is another like huge part of the game, is these WarioWare type mini games. Just as a quick rundown here, as you're playing the story, as you're going through Florence's life, you'll often do little movement mini games to kind of illustrate what she's going through. There's a little like matching game, to illustrate her her accounting job, and then like you can like eat food and like brush her teeth. Once you get into the relationship, you can like swipe a piece of paper to like draw a picture of Krish, or you can fan out a Polaroid to like see parts of their dating life. So that's the kind of interaction you'll be doing as you play this game. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Some of them worked better than others. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I want to hit on the ones that I didn't think worked at first, because I think the ones that do work I want to highlight more. I don't want to like choose to like be more positive about the game, but I do feel much more strongly about the ones that worked.
Oh yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, so like the ones that did not work for me, I guess they're the mini games where they kind of give the illusion of choice, but they didn't really have much of a bearing on the game. The one that comes to mind the most is like, choosing what you're moving in and putting in storage whenever Krish and Florence move in together. That part of the game, like the more I've thought about it, the more I wanted it to greatly impact something. I don't know. Like I just wanted, it was a mini game that kind of like didn't add any consequence, and in the moment I felt like, oh, this is big, like I'm choosing what things in Florence's life or in Krish's life that they have to give up to be together. But it just didn't pan out that way. There's a short, like kind of like section where you kind of go back over it and everything's in black and white, and it's kind of hard to remember whose is whose, and it's like illustrating that you're breaking the life up that they shared, But it wasn't as effective to me as I think as it should have been. It's one of those things where it's like, I wanted more from some of the mini games like that.
Oh, that's very interesting because I actually really liked that one. I would put that in my category of one of the most narratively impactful mini games. But that's very interesting. I'm sure there's some that I didn't really care for that you really liked. Maybe that's a good thing, that there's
Yeah.
a smattering of games that are going to kind of speak to different people. Yeah, that's very interesting. Were there any others that you just didn't think hit the mark?
So like the monotony of the job, like kind of matching the numbers and stuff like that, was just a very like I don't think it's supposed to be challenging because I think that's the point of that scene is to illustrate that she's doing something that's just kind of like drone work. But again, it was something else that we kind of just like infer from her miserable face sitting in front of her desk. That one almost seemed like it was a little uninspired and like didn't really, again, didn't really add too much to the scene that we were already inferring just from her body language and miserable face.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. I think I'd agree with you on that one.
Yeah. So what about you? Did you have any that you weren't so hot on?
None. I would categorize mine. I don't really have any examples. Like maybe brushing teeth. Wasn't really that good. Turning the clock to illustrate passage of time kind of seemed a little bit like busy work. I would split it up as probably the mini games were about a third of busy work, a third of them were fairly engaging, kind of just were keeping me invested in the story, and about a third of them I thought were very clever and narratively impactful. There were a few of them where I like clearly knew like what the joke, not joke, but knew what like the point was, what the joke of them quote is, but just doing them, it didn't. They were so impactful that doing them was still impactful to do them.
Yeah, and just to kind of highlight the impactful stuff, I think this is where like Florence excels. The one that I think we could probably all unanimously agree upon as like being just a massive success in this game. And if you disagree, Will, feel free to. I just this is really one that I find hard to like dislike. It's the conversation bubbles.
Oh yes, I was going to highlight that. Yes.
Yeah, illustrating how they're growing closer by their conversation puzzles being like basically how this works is you get these little bubbles that pop up onto the screen, and you kind of have these like these little puzzle pieces that you have to fit into the bubble to make a successful conversation. But as they grow closer together, it becomes easier and easier for them to converse until you're just filling the bubble with one big blob. But where they really like pulled it out and where this minigame really like hit me was during like the arguments when you're trying to piece together like a retort, and then it's like very aggressive how they're coming back and forth at each other. And like for me, I like as Florence, I was trying not to make the conversation too one-sided because like you're like, I think the game wants to kind of illustrate like, oh, are you trying to win the argument, and you can like kind of really like stack up on Krish and like get a bunch of responses in, and your responses take on more pointed shapes and stuff, and it becomes harder to have a conversation with him as things kind of fall apart between them, and it's beautiful.
That's very interesting. I know what part you're talking about. I didn't really even think about what Krish was doing at that time, like because it gave you the bubble, and I just kept putting the bubble in there in the thing because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. I didn't realize I was supposed to be interacting with Krish.
No. Krish is also forming bubbles during the argument, and if you let him respond more, your side of the screen will grow smaller and you'll kind of shrink. But if you make more, his side will grow smaller and he will shrink. Or you can kind of keep things even.
Oh, that's really cool. I kind of wish I knew that was an option to see, because I that may be just an issue with WarioWare type mini games is you're kind of incentivized. Like when you see mini games like that, you kind of are incentivized do them as quickly as possible because that's normally what you want to do, right? So I didn't even think beyond just it gives you the bubble, you're supposed to do it as soon as possible. So I felt like I'm really glad you mentioned that because that's a whole part of the story that I missed there.
Yeah, and it's a really important part too because I think that's why they chose that mini game for that segment, because you're like, oh yeah, I want to put these together as quick as possible. That's the game, right? Well, it's coming at the cost of like you're taking over the conversation and running him into the ground, and it's like a weird, like it doesn't work on a level, but then it does, because it's just like whenever you think back, it illustrates that like what an argument is,
For sure. Yeah. I love that they've done something like that. Yeah. I just wish that they could have like maybe clued you in, like, hey, you
brought your
might
attention
wanna,
to it more.
yeah, you may want to like think about how you're doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, like, the conversation bubbles were something that I just think about. Like I noticed something a little bit different about them each time I've played. Like both the times that I played the game is just they're very well done, and it almost feels like that was the part of the game that the game was conceptualized on almost.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. I was really blown away by the fact that in an argument, the puzzle, like I don't know what you call them, nubs, became sharper. I felt that in terms of like narratively impactful, I thought that was a really nice touch, and one of those moments where I like was most invested into the story.
Yeah, and so did you have any others that you liked before we move on to the next little bit of this?
Oh, yeah. Decorating the home, and then again, de-decorating the home after they broke up, I felt was really cool. I actually kind of like that I could take items that weren't that I didn't initially place. And I think that that's a pretty interesting commentary on like the politics of what happens in a breakup. Not to get too personal here, but I've had a really bad breakup in my life. A very long-term relationship that kind of imploded and wasn't really great for either party. And I remember kind of those kind of backhanded politics, like like who keeps what, like how do we separate our lives. So I thought that was a great commentary on that, even though it was very subtle.
Yeah, that's true. It's like kind of like and almost like who even belongs, what even belongs to who at this point. Yeah.
For sure. So I love that. I mentioned putting the photo in the box at the end. That wasn't really a game, but just the fact that I physically took the picture and put it into the box. I remember seeing the photo and thinking Florence should keep that. She should grow to be the person who can look back on that relationship and think of it as a good thing that happened to her, even though it kind of imploded. The fact that I was able to put that into the box was really striking. It really kind of sold the ending of it. And another one real quick is and this is an example of like I knew exactly what was going to happen as soon as I saw the puzzle, but it didn't hurt the impactfulness of it. At the end, like during the breakup, when they're laying in bed and they're not facing each other, and it's like a puzzle.
Ooh.
And you're supposed to create Krish and then create Florence, and you're like, okay, I know I'm going to make each of these people, and then they're not going to fit together. But so like it doesn't create. It's still two photos. It doesn't become one. Even though I saw that from a mile away, just seeing it happen was still really impactful.
Yeah, very good, very very well done in that regard. And I think that one of the wins for this game too is just like the mini games where you just like literally couldn't win. One of them was the one where like similar to the puzzle you were talking about where you just couldn't solve it all the way. The puzzle of the picture of the two of them where they're holding each other, and as you're trying to put the puzzle together, the pieces are kind of falling back apart again. It's like things that are so far gone now that no matter how hard you try, you're just not going to be able to piece it back together. Too much damage was done.
Yeah, that one was interesting. I felt that one was a little too on the nose. It was a little too kind of like not subtle enough, but no, I definitely see what they were going for. And once I understood what was going on, I was like, yeah, I understand what this was trying to say about the story.
Yeah, for sure. I guess from there, is there anything else you want to talk about Florence before we get into quick hints?
Again, I would like to reiterate, I like this game. I wish that there was a bit more detail, but I like what it had to say. I liked how Florence was able to grow at the end of the story. We should probably highlight, I meant to mention this earlier. When I played the game the first time, I kind of assumed that Florence was a real person. Kind of like one of those comic books you see where like it's autobiographical and they talk about a problem that they had in their life, and it always ends like, and then my problem, like, went away for better or worse, and then I grew as a person, and then I became a great artist. I was able to create this book. I've read a couple of things like that, and I was actually kind of surprised to find out that Florence is fictional. That it's this is not like the artist or something like that. I felt that it actually kind of made the points that the game made a bit more. I feel like the thesis of this game is like it's more thoughtful. I think is a good term, knowing that it's a story that people wanted to tell instead of like an autobiographical thing. Maybe I should think about why I feel that way a little bit more, but that was surprising. I did play thinking that Florence was like the creator of the game.
Well, I think I can relate to the feeling you're having, because I think it comes off as more earnest whenever it's something that you're like, hey, I'm going to devote time, money, and effort to this project. And you just really want to tell this story about this particular relationship. I don't know. It's just a very nice thing to have people devoting time to something that we can all relate to, but isn't necessarily like specific to themselves.
Yeah, you're nailing it. I think that's exactly hitting how I'm feeling. It's okay. Maybe I should stop trying to put this into words. One other thing I want to say real quick. I like the story. I would like to see these kind of mini game, like the mini game concept of like becoming more invested in a story, and these mini games being narratively impactful. I would like to see this type of like mini game narrative gameplay applied to a game with a bit more bite, more story, more detail. Like, so take what this game did and then put it towards something that's a bit more substantial, crunchy, so I hope that maybe they could, the studio, the director could iterate on this and create something that this is like a good base work for, and then create something like an Edith Finch, something that has a lot more going on and something you can really delve into.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of hitting on a conversation point we'll be getting into in a little bit, which is the reception to this game. But I guess from here, let's hop into some quick hits.
All right, okay, yeah, let's get to the quick hits.
All right, so our first one. Do you like how this game approached? I mean, I think we're both going to answer this pretty similarly, but do you feel like the format of the delivery of this story and message was effective?
I think so. For what they were trying to say, I do think that this was a good format, and probably they could have done a couple of different things differently. But overall, I think for what they were trying to do, this was pretty close to the right game for that.
Yeah, it didn't. So the thing I asked myself whenever I finished this was like, why did they do it this way? Could this story have been told differently? And I think that in the way that they told it, no, because like they did integrate the story into the mini games, and like just a lot of you like interacting with it. Like a lot of the emotions are like kind of like done up by us, like performing these actions, which I think is where it makes it a little bit more into the category of being hard to replicate. You would have to do other things to bridge those gaps, like, add more dialogue if it were a movie or a book or something else. And I think that's where I see it as an effective format.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So as much as I'd like to see changes to this game, I understand that those changes make this a very different game.
Sure. Yeah. And I think you already answered our second one. Like, you want to see similar games to this, right?
Yeah, yes, with more detail, more story, more narrative. Something. Hey, let's be honest. Moby Dick, War and Peace. People love these. Any Game of Thrones, anything by Brandon Sanderson. People love like this really deep, immersive world building and character development. There's a reason that like, we love huge sweeping narratives like this, is because they're engaging. So I think that you could add a lot more detail, but still keep these the mini game aspect to it, and still tell a very engaging story.
Yeah, okay. And my answer is also on the same note. Like, I love the WarioWare games, like, Smooth Moves and stuff like that. Tristan and my girlfriend likes them as well. It's just a fun video game format to have like a mishmash of like different mini games, and like using them to tell stories, I think is like a really like fun solution in like the video game world, because it does kind of change what kind of like visual novels you can create by using these small things to create interaction into like elicit emotion. It's a really nice thought, and it made me want to see more things that are like taking this approach for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
So big question. This is kind of open a can of worms here, because this is like kind of at the roots of a lot of the discourse for this game. Was Florence too short?
No, I don't think so. Again, like I said, this was the game that they needed to make to tell the story that they wanted to. And let's also be honest, this is a this is a mobile game. You're supposed to be able to play this in short bursts, while you're on the bus or something like that. I know it's short to get through, but this is a game that really benefits from you like stewing in it, like really thinking about what the game is trying to tell you. So yeah, you could just breeze through this, but like I would not tell anybody. If I was going to recommend this to somebody, I would tell them, hey, make sure you're spending time really absorbing as much as you can from this, because it's a much better experience. So no, I would say it's actually the exact right size that needs to be, especially with it being a mobile game.
Yeah, I hate to create an opinion bubble here. I really wish that I could have a different opinion on this, but I feel very much the same as you. Like, so just to kind of give a little bit of background, when this game came out, a lot of people just didn't like this game because it felt like, I beat this game in 30 minutes. I paid money for this. Yep. There's not really any value in going back and replaying this. Is that okay? And it's like, yeah, I think it is. Like, art, the subjective art form, the thing we've talked about before is that like whenever an artist is trying to say something, this is why we depend on reviews and stuff like that, and why we depend on pretentious podcasts like ours, is that you should always seek out opinions before you go into something new. And one thing that everyone will say when talking about Florence is it is a short game. It is quick, but it is effective in its messaging, I think, anyways. There has always just been like a little bit of like a especially in comparison to Monument Valley, which is a much more like substantial game. Like there's more in it, and there's more time that you'll spend playing it. A lot of people kind of saw this as disappointing because you're waiting for this person's next game. It comes out and you beat it in a half hour and it's done. But I think that's more our fault in how we approach media than it is the artists.
Do you think that concern would even be a talking point if this game was free?
That's tough, because then like maybe not, but I think that especially like on indie games like this, it's hard for me to ever argue for it to be free, because like sure, while your engagement might go up, these indie companies that they are much more dependent on hard income than someone like I guess like Epic for like Apex Legends, because you're getting like ad space for those games, where for this game, it's a 30-minute narrative-driven game. It's really hard to work ads into its monetization, or like it's hard to like get streamers on and playing it for a long amount of time. It being a free game, I think would actually hurt it in terms of, or hurt the developers more than it would help them personally.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, this is not a game you can monetize in any other way than just charging for it.
Yes.
And I think the world is a better place for having this game in it. So I think this is a game I would say is worth the price of admission. And honestly, for games like this, we should kind of be more willing to pay for these kinds of experiences, because paying for them is what allows stuff like this to exist, right?
Yeah. Whenever a big AAA studio that has the ability to market their Fortnites or Apex Legends or Rocket Leagues or whatever, like, whenever they are like having their stuff or having like Monster featured inside of their game or something like that, they're getting a lot of money from that deal. Whenever a streamer plays their game for 6 hours straight, that's how they get it. I think there is a price if you want artful, thoughtful experiences. I think we do have to kind of like reconcile with the fact that, like, hey, some good things will need to be paid for if we want them to exist. I agree with you.
Sure. Okay, maybe this is my controversial opinion for the day. $4 for a like 45-minute to an hour narrative experience is worth it. It's like, compare that to all the other things that you buy. And I think that $4 is absolutely worth the price of admission for this story.
Yeah, I hate to bring up the cup of coffee argument, because sometimes, coffee can be a little bit cheaper, a little bit more, or whatever. But this really is like, this will last you longer than the $4 for a cup of coffee will.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely worth your time. Okay, yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you for this exhortation. I really appreciate that you're willing to share these really engaging narrative experiences with me.
Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I know this is 2 back-to-back like mobile games, or games that started as mobile games in the case of Sorcery, but this is just where my mind's been at. I think my next one after our next couple of episodes is going to be a little bit more off of a little bit more out of the way in terms of what I've been bringing to the table.
Sure, yeah, not to talk about the show on the show, but I love the idea of this being just kind of a record of like where we're both at in terms of our gaming experience, and where we're at on movies and TV. So I'm totally fine with that. And somebody has to balance out the go-to duties that someone is bringing to the show.
I'm telling you, man, I'm doing everything I can to hold the ship up. Like, you bring in your waifu stuff and your go-to duties. Is like, it's really tough to keep us going, but we're gonna get there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely bringing the trash to this podcast. But speaking of trash, we are not going to be talking about trash next episode. Jordan, I think it's time.
Would you say we kept you waiting?
We may have been keeping the Dandy Dogs waiting. If you've listened to this podcast, I don't think it's any secret that Jordan and I are both huge Metal Gear fans. Jordan, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a Metal Gear fan are you? I
would say like a hard 10, maybe 11. Formative video game series for me, one that I've played since my I'll mention this here in a moment whenever we show our hand, but I've been playing since the GameCube era. I love this series to death. Nice.
Yeah, me too. I'm at like a 9.99999. We love Metal Gear, and hey, we have a platform, so we want to do a big exhortation on Metal Gear, and we're going to start with, of course, the one that almost everyone starts with, Metal Gear Solid. Next week, we are starting our deep dive into the Metal Gear series with the first game, the one that almost everyone starts with, Metal Gear Solid. And we are exploring everything about this game. We're going to talk about our thoughts on the gameplay, on the story, how it influenced us as people and gamers, so to speak. And I think that both of us are going to have a lot to say about this milestone of gaming.
Are you ready to hear the most controversial thing that I could possibly say in regards to this game?
Yes.
I've never played the original PlayStation 1 version of Metal Gear Solid.
Really? Wow.
The version I played was the GameCube remake.
Oh, Twin Snakes. Yeah. Oh, yes. That is so interesting.
Yeah, that, because I'm a little bit on the the younger spectrum in terms of like gaming. Like, my first console was I got an Xbox and a GameCube around the same time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Man, that is so interesting. So I guess the plan is for you to play the original PlayStation 1 before our episode, right?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to be playing Good Old Games actually has the PlayStation version up on their site, so I'll be playing it on my PC, but I'm going to be trying to play it with the PlayStation controller.
Okay.
Doing my best.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Well, I think we can definitely next episode talk about the differences between the original PlayStation and then the GameCube remake. I'm sure you'll have, I have some thoughts about that. I'm sure you do too. But yes. Join us next episode for something that has been in the works for a while. But we are going to start off a series on Metal Gear and everything we love, some things we don't, and what it means to us. So join us for that. It's going to be a really great time.
Yeah. So just to clarify things, this is part 1 of a multi-part Metal Gear Solid discussion. We're covering Metal Gear Solid 1, Part 2 will be Metal Gear Solid 2, and that is off in the indeterminate future. It will happen one day, but for now we're going to be covering Metal Gear Solid.
I can't stay away from Go to Duty too much. I can't be playing Metal Gear Solid for like a year straight.
Yeah, I can't be doing that. We do have other trash, like freeware games that we got to hit up.
Sure, yeah. So join us for that next episode. It's gonna be bigger. I'm sure it's gonna be like our biggest, most in-depth episode we've done so far. I know I have like pages and pages of stuff I want to say about this game. So it'll be a good time. And then normal exhortations will resume afterwards. But how do you feel about going into the back matter?
Let's do that. You kick us off, Will. I know you said you kept your back matter secret from me.
Well, okay. So as I mentioned before, we stepped away from the podcast for a bit, but I am now on summer break, baby. That's right.
Hey, boy.
I have been I've been ears deep into schoolwork for a while, and I'm finally out of it. So now the one thing that's on my mind right now is taking stock of all the stuff I want to accomplish over the summer. I gotta get into Death Stranding. Resident Evil 8's coming out. I've got Gundam I want to put together. There's all sorts of anime I want to watch. So right now I am just shaking at the possibilities of the stuff that I can get into over the summer. And that's pretty much all I've been doing is trying to kind of write down all the things I want to focus on and come up with a plan for what I want to focus on.
Yeah, and as far as the podcast goes, we have some, maybe some special stuff brewing. We're still kind of working it out in the background, but hopefully we'll have more to say about that on the next episode.
Sure, yeah. I'm very interested in hearing what you've been up to since our little quasi-break.
Okay, so for me, since we last recorded this podcast, Monster Hunter Rise has come out. Mm-hmm. And this is a Monster Hunter household. Tristan and I are... very much that's our kind of like shared game. When a new Monster Hunter comes out, we jam together, and we've been doing that since the Monster Hunter 4U days on the 3DS. So we've played through Generations, some of Worlds. We had a hard time with that being on PlayStation as opposed to a Nintendo console, and now we're going real hard on Rise, which is like it's kind of influenced heavily by Japanese culture. Where the previous games have been this weird, like kind of European mishmash, maybe like kind of like a African kind of influence. This one is like all into like katanas and samurai gear and like very like Japanese influence, like artistry. It's great. I've always loved the Monster Hunter series. It's introduced a lot of quality of life improvements, like to movement and traversing the environment, that have made this probably my favorite Monster Hunter so far.
That's very interesting. I haven't played any Monster Hunters, so I actually have very little idea of what this game actually is.
It's the like go deep game of go deep games. Like I put it up there with Dark Souls in terms of like, hey, you can play this game casually, but if you decide that you want to like go hard, there's almost an endless like pool of like flexibility and options, and like it's a very like this, like you are playing one game sort of game.
Okay, yeah, that seems very interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on Rise once you're completely through it.
Alternatively, I just wrapped up the Berserk manga.
Oh,
yeah. That one was really tough to finish, I'm gonna say, for good reasons. It was so it's not done, which is frustrating. It's been on a slight hiatus for some time now, and I don't know when the next volume is supposed to release, or like the next issue is, but it's been incredible to say the least. All the hype that was leveled at that series, after having read through it all, I would say is deserved. It is very good, and I'm sad that there's not more of it out, even though it's a 20-year-old manga.
Yeah. There are a couple of those mangas that started a while back and have been going, and they're technically still ongoing, but like they're these huge hiatuses. So they're kind of, it's like a real treat for the fans when a new chapter drops because it's so few and far between.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that this is a really old manga, but there aren't that many volumes. For as long as it's been around, there's only like 40.
That's very interesting.
For something to have been around for 20 years and to have, and like to be so influential, to be such a, like you can get through that series fast. And like very sad whenever I brought it to it, like reached the last one, because there's a lot of unresolved stuff in that story, and I hope that they do finish it. I hope this isn't one of those that they take to the grave.
Yeah,
but,
it sounds like it might be a Game of Thrones situation where I have very low hopes for ever getting the next book.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I have high hopes, but my expectations are that my heart will probably be broken. But I would also recommend reading it with the caveat that, yeah, you're not going to get resolution to the main storyline. But I think that does it for me for Back Matter this week. We got some other stuff to talk about in the future, and we're going to be hitting on it as we go. But for next time, it's going to be Metal Gear Solid. Will, is there anything else you want to go over before we head out?
No, I think that's it. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Just Dandies. It really does mean the world to us. If you're listening to this in podcast form, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes. So think about that if you'd like to. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a subscribe. You like the video, hit the bell icon if you want the notifications, and leave a comment. That makes us so happy. You can follow Jordan on Twitter at Action Pancake. I'm at Agra Rhetoric on Twitter, and we would love it if you would follow along with our exhortations and stay up to date on all the latest Disc Dandies excitement at Disc Dandies Pod. Join us here next episode for another spin with the Disc Dandies.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Later.